Aaron, welcome.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, my name is Aaron Jacobs. I'm from the greater Cleveland area in Ohio, and I was a public school music teacher, mostly doing high school and middle school band for the last like 15 years or so. And I recently decided to leave the teaching field and start my own online fitness company because I saw the need for teachers to have a wellness advocate. And there's nobody out there right now really, I think, pushing for it in necessarily the fitness space. And there's a huge gap in meeting the needs of teachers. And right now, teachers are leaving the field in droves. And I left the field actually for very similar reasons, in addition to seeing a way that I could help maybe stop that. So right now, since COVID, there are about 500,000 fewer teachers in the schools than there were. It's dropped off significantly, and I've of course added to that statistic, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But um, last year, my mental health was in a terrible, terrible place. I battled some real demons last year, and I could just say that I'm very fortunate to still be here talking to you and to have the opportunities that I have now before me. Because at this time last year, I was still thinking I was going to be stuck doing the same thing for the rest of my life, and that I was trapped by the security that that job provided me from an income standpoint,
Mhm.
and I wasn't thinking clearly at all. And so I finally decided to get clarity and just understand that you only live life once. And I think like any teacher, we're all looking for impact is what we really desire. We want to have an impact on the world that leaves the world a better place than we found it. And I wasn't seeing the public schools do that in the most effective way, nor did I feel like I was in the best position to do that for others in the position I was in. And so when I really had a chance to objectively understand why my mental health was so bad, it was because I was not where I was supposed to be. And I wasn't supposed to be there as long as I was, and I didn't listen to myself when those thoughts started to bubble up. And so now, about 1 year later, I launched my business in October of 2024, and I've been working with mostly teachers, and we've been shedding weight on the body and lifting weights and having a blast and building new healthy habits, opening eyes, and even though we are a small community right now, we are small but mighty and making some real deep impacts on people's lives that are working with me, and it's been awesome. And so it's only a matter of time before the impact on the education space is bigger. So as with any business, it starts small, humble, to get good quality reps and to help people the right way. And I'm just building the foundation for something that's huge that no one else is doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a journey that you've gone on. Um, so one of the biggest questions I have is, when my wife and I we were looking at schools and we tried public schools, we tried, different private schools.
Mhm.
None of them really stood out. No matter what the cost was, it just none of them really stood out. So, and I've been hearing that a lot of teachers have been leaving. Why is it that teachers are leaving?
So there's a multitude of reasons. And obviously, speaking from my personal experience, it was a mental health situation. And like, if you've never been in a classroom before, let me just paint a picture here. So because of the litigious nature of our society, your the stress that you're put under as a teacher in terms of monitoring student behavior, you are on pretty much the entire day. And very often, I think a lot of teachers are put in this state of, and I certainly felt this way all the time, you're kind of in this like constant state of fight or flight because kids are very unpredictable, and especially in large groups with you being the only adult in the room. Like if you've never experienced what it's like to do that on a regular basis, you simply have no idea what that type of stress is like. And are there jobs that are more stressful and more dangerous than public school or school teachers in general? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are people that do really dangerous jobs on like the ocean, mining, natural resources. People in the medical profession have some very stressful jobs as well, in certain fields in particular, like if you're an emergency room doctor or nurse, as just one example. But the unique kind of stress and and mental essentially burnout that takes place with a lot of teachers, I think is very common because of that. And another thing that I just researched this last week that will be on my podcast episode that I'll release next week. I was very curious about taking a look at the average productivity of of a private sector worker.
Mhm.
And that's employees. That does not include people like you and me, John. That we're, as you had a great post the other day about we all work for ourselves. We're signing up to work a lot more hours than we think we are, and I
Yeah.
knew that. Like I was no
Mhm.
stranger to putting in a ton of hours as a high school band director. Of course, I think any high school band director would tell you that. Um, but when it comes to like the amount of productive hours someone puts in a given day, there's data out there and research firms that have suggested that the average private sector employee is only productive for 3 to 4 hours out of their 8 hour workday. Meanwhile, teachers are forced to and contracted to be productive and on in front of students usually 6 or more hours a day and given minimal planning time within their contracted day to then meet the needs of all their students. So the system itself, in terms of the amount of hours that we demand out of people, I don't think is good. And for me, fixing that, here's my opinion. Let me adjust my seating here.
Mhm.
For me, here's my opinion on that. I think rather than shaming, and like this is not me shaming that, oh, private sector workers have it so easy. And if you work a cushy corporate job, I don't like you, and teachers have it so hard. I don't want to do that. I don't like the idea of having a victim mentality. I'm all about finding solutions. And that's certainly the mentality I take with my clients. It's like, hey, you missed some workouts this week. Let's find a solution. My solution is I think we need to shorten school days for everybody because I think kids' attention spans are also like not even outside of social media. Let's face it, like there's only so many hours you're going to get out of some kids throughout the
Mhm.
day, right? So I think school days need to be shorter. I think school needs to be more year round so that you don't have all the learning loss you have over the summer. Um, and I think just spreading things out more evenly would do a lot of good. We take so many hours and try to plug it into a school year in a compressed timeline. And with the amount of hours teachers put in general, this will also be on my podcast episode next week, they're working more hours in a year, especially when you include non-contract hours versus the average public sector employee, and they're compressing it into a 10-month window as opposed to a 12-month year-round work model. So there's a workload and timeline factor that feeds into that burnout, not to mention the aforementioned parts of the mental toll it takes when you have to be on and in a state of fight or flight all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just remember when I went to public school, the from elementary school, I mean, all uh, kindergarten through high school, right? We're just giving our teachers a lot of trouble
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many of us to the ratio just wasn't there.
Right.
It's not a good ratio.
Yeah, small class sizes, I'm a big advocate for those, and that does
Mhm.
require some more funding. And hey, like there's times where just saying more funding for schools in general, I don't think is productive because a lot of times it can get misused or sent to the wrong directions. I mean, just like the federal government, there's a ton of administrative bloat in education too, where like you get like these specialists here and this administrative assistant for this special thing over here. Like whereas you could potentially just hire two teachers with that same, administrator salary.
Mhm.
And so school districts need to be really thoughtful about how many administrators they're hiring. Obviously, the workload, this is not to say that I don't like administrators. I think administrators have a really hard job in their own right. Um, but how that funding is used, I think it's really important rather than just buying stuff. Like it's the people that make things go. And there's
Mhm.
really a lot of countries, a lot of other countries besides America treat education as something that's much more important than we treat it. And
Yeah.
to me, if you're going to properly fund it and take care of the kids and the people, and you want to improve things like mental health, it can't just be something that is just a cliche that you just say over and over again. Like there has to be actionable steps that we take. And so, to me, more educational freedom and letting teachers have less to worry about when it comes to the state mandated tests over and over again. I mean, you want to talk about motivating kids? Kids really motivated by taking tests. I mean, there's the 10% of kids that are like, and I will say like a lot of these kids were in my program because when you teach the arts, you get a large population of kids and a wide array of kids, but you tend to draw very smart people to the arts. There just
Mhm.
tends to be a strong correlation with kids that participate in the arts and
Yeah.
also do well on things like the SAT, the ACT, get into those more elite colleges and universities. And and so I had those kids in my program. And so for those 10 to 20% of kids that care about that, that's great. But looking at the way the job market is trending, there's with AI.
Mhm.
there's going to be a greater need for things like trades, physical labor. Like an AI is not showing up to my house and fixing the pipe that bursts because I live in Ohio and it's about to be frigid cold next week. Like I'm not getting Terminator to show up to fix that next week. It's going to have to be
Right.
a person that knows what they're doing that can come on site and do that actual labor. So the job market has shifted. And so, yeah, I just think education is, as always with any large entity, it's very, very difficult to shift the paradigm quickly. So I think a lot of ways we're stuck in the past, and that's part of it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you with the education system. I mean, it killed school killed learning for me. I have learned way more after school than I did sitting in the classroom for 8 hours a
Yeah.
day.
Well, and to get into real estate, like even I don't know if you, do you have your license in real estate?
No.
See, yeah, a lot of people that work in real estate, depending on what you do, don't even need your license, which I've
No.
found really interesting. And so I'm sure like a lot of your education has come by doing in the
Yeah.
business world. And that's certainly been the case for me. I've learned a whole new way of like understanding marketing, understanding sales, understanding client fulfillment, like all those things have been a crash course the last 9 months for
Yeah.
sure. But a welcome one. It is a little drinking from a fire hose at first, but now it's starting to slow down, and I'm like now seeking new avenues and ways to improve my craft and also further my skills as well, which has been really fun.
Yeah, it's actually an enjoyable experience if you just, appreciate the journey versus trying to go for the goal the entire time.
Hmm.
But okay, so then realizing that your current situation is not where you want to be, so then what do you do? What changes in your life do you make in your life to figure out what is it you want to do?
So, I mean, for starters, I think a lot of teachers need to consider and be better about money management, if I'm being
Hmm.
completely frank. And I'm very fortunate that, I came from a family that understood how to do that very effectively. And I don't think that's really a big secret. Like, I don't own a very fancy car. I've really almost never had a car payment my entire life. I think a lot of people, it's like a coping mechanism. Like you take yourself out for alcohol, you go to fancy restaurants, and you buy the nicest car that you can afford. Like even people that aren't teachers do these same negative behaviors. And
Hmm.
so you don't leave yourself the economic flexibility and freedom to pivot in your life. So as my income continued to go up, as I put more years into the teaching system, my expenses went down. Like other than investing in my own personal real estate, which I do own my own home, and it is almost entirely paid off, which also made it easy to make this move or easier to make this move, right? Like
Right.
having all of that taken care of by before age 40, like most people aren't in that situation. And yes, I'm more fortunate to be in that position because I don't have kids yet, but also that was part of the plan from when I was in my 20s, was that financial savvy of like, okay, don't spend your money on stupid bullcrap because of the freedom that you can gain from that later. And now I'm so blessed to be able to then live that to a point where whatever business I decided to pivot to, whatever venture I wanted to explore, I have a super duper long runway to figure things out no matter what. And so I realized, okay, as long as I can secure a decent healthcare plan, which as a fitness professional, I probably should have, because if I toss up a barbell the wrong way and my arm gets all out of whack, I
Hmm.
probably need to go see a chiropractor or go see an
Right.
orthopedic person. Like, so I do
Mhm.
need that. But outside of that, once I secured that, it was like, okay, I can do whatever I want and I can pivot to whatever I want. So first, it was just putting yourself in a position to know that you have the freedom to explore, and one of the things that I think really got to me after a while is the lack of continued human development I felt being stuck as a teacher. And I think that may even go back to your first question. You get stuck in
Mhm.
that same job, and the opportunity for advancement is just, okay, we'll go be a principal. And like that's not for everybody, because advancing from a teacher to a principal is a pay bump for a lot of people, but it's not necessarily advancing to get better at the same craft. So you
Mhm.
don't feel that same sense of progression. So I was also feeling that. But when it came down to just figuring things out, it was really just understanding that I needed to be in a position to keep learning and growing as a person, and also taking steps from a very early adult age to put myself in a spot financially to where I'm in control of my time and my things do not control me. And when you put yourself in that position and you have that state of relaxation and that state of comfortability, that foundation to build your life on, then your brain, you'll be amazed that if you just give yourself time to think where you want to go, where are your interests naturally drawn to. And certainly for me, I had a big weight loss this summer after the COVID quarantines. And I realized the power of that and how that could help transform education and how teachers are perceived in the world in terms of our strength, our ability to problem solve, our ability to set an example for kids. So it was just kind of an obvious realization after a while when I gave myself that space and that mental clarity, what was actually possible.
Yeah. So then how did you, so when during COVID, everything kind of shut down, right? And then
Yes.
I kind of went in the same way where you either come out of it better or worse.
Hmm.
And so you kind of went the, I want to come out of it better, right?
Yeah, and at first, the transformation of getting better was made that much more dramatic because I got worse at first. So,
Uh,
yeah, I love to tell the very short story of like my really bad eating habits during COVID. So,
mhm,
I didn't understand the power of just non-exercise activity and walking around a lot during COVID. So, I did
mhm.
a lot of sitting on my butt in this very chair right here during COVID and wasn't walking a lot. I was starting to work out. I did join a gym right before the quarantines, and so I had the gym owner brought some equipment over in his truck, and I was working out at home. I didn't
Nice.
understand anything about how to eat properly. Like it was
Mhm,
bad, and so if you've ever been to a Greek restaurant, I love Greek food, by the way. I live right by an awesome Greek restaurant.
mhm.
Um, do you know saganaki? Like they pour the stuff on it and they say opa and they light the cheese on fire. It's a big
I've
block of
never heard of
cheese.
that.
Dude,
I need
it's
to.
so good. Yeah. But I will say I don't eat it very much anymore because I feel like garbage, but it's just a big old hunk of cheese and they light it on fire. And like I was eating a block of cheese like that almost every day. Like I can't imagine. I must have been like 1,000 calories of cheese like almost every day. I was like eating my feelings in cheese
Mhm.
during the quarantine. And then when I finally stepped on the scale in June, when I started like I properly started the fitness journey when the gym opened up, I was at my heaviest weight of my entire life at 206 pounds. I'm only like 5'9" for context. And it was not a good 206, like not a lot of muscle. It was, I mean, and there's pictures of my before, what my face looked like, what my body looked like, what I used to look like in my first few years of teaching. It's on Instagram. Like it's all
Mhm.
there. I try to include it in things I post as often as possible because I never want people to like think that I'm some sort of elitist that I've done things that you can't do. I want people to show that I've absolutely been where like at that starting point, and as someone who does this for a living, I never want to forget my own starting point because it keeps you humble and it keeps you able to relate to the people that you're working with. But anyways, so like it made that transformation that much more dramatic. And then in one summer I dropped about 41 pounds, about 10
Wow.
to 12 weeks. And it was just learning. I actually learned how to understand energy intake. And then I was actually doing a proper training plan, something that was way more structured, was certainly much more intense than I'd ever done. Um, and that drove some real results. And I walked back in to start band up in the summer, which wasn't like full on how you would usually see bands because it was still COVID and they ended up
Mhm.
canceling all the competitions. But, you know, the kids had only seen me 2.5 months before that on a camera, continuously getting larger and larger. And then I showed up and all of a sudden, like, I've got like real muscle popping through. I've like lost 25 pounds at that point, and they're like, who are you? What have you been doing? Like, we haven't seen you for 2.5 months. And so that was a really cool feeling. And when the kids saw that, I was like, okay, this is powerful. Because if teachers can set this kind of an example for other people, like, yeah, that's awesome. And especially through a difficult time in everyone's lives like that, like, you know, if through the greatest trials, if you can come out on the other side a better version of yourself, it's a foundation for doing great things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, all right, you start your own journey. At what point, what is your next step? When do you decide, though, this is what I want to do?
It really was not until probably around this time last year that I decided that this was something that I could even think about doing. I've been coaching part time. I still do because I never want to lose touch with coaching in person because I think it helps you cue and correct form better.
Mhm.
So I'd been coaching in person for about 2.5 years part time, and also ended up getting a nutrition coach certification as well, um, just for fun. Because at the time, the summer before, I had the idea of trying to teach a class at the high school, but um, public schools are inflexible. There's a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump through to teach that kind of stuff to people, especially in public schools. And I just didn't, it just wasn't going to happen. And so I was like, okay, let me bring this in a way that I can do, that I have full control over, and let me
Mhm.
just get some help to get it there and figure it out.
All right. Okay. So then, what's your next step then?
So my next step was I actually came across 2 or 3 days after I decided that I was resigning from teaching and leaving the profession, I messaged a gentleman who goes by the handle of Rising Father on Instagram. His name's Chris Rodak. Awesome, awesome guy. And the reason I reached out to him is because I found out that he's actually a former band director himself. And
Mm.
he now has like over 160,000 followers on Instagram. He runs a successful coaching business for fathers to transform their lives. He does amazing work. And I just said, okay, like if he's a former band director and he can make this leap, there must be a way to do this. And so he put me on the path for like how to be impactful with your content and kind of what it looks like to keep people accountable, but also show empathy within that kind of a coaching setting. And, it gave me a nice goal to build towards because he's like obviously a couple years way like 2, 3 years ahead of me in terms of developing things. And so um, I worked with him off and on for about 6 months. And then it kind of bounced from one mentorship to the next to kind of get things off the ground. And so, now I'm with you guys in Martell Elite, which is a whole range of different businesses, but
Mm.
like
Yeah.
being in the same room as people that, there was the guy in the call like last week that he's like, yeah, I exited my finance company for $50 million and just very casually said that. I was like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, am I a millionaire? Yes, but I don't have that kind of FU money. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I can do what I want and build another business money. I don't have the FU money. I can do whatever I want whenever I want money.
Mhm.
uh, and nor is that really my goal right now, I guess. Yeah, I want to build something really good. And so I don't, I, the money early on is like, not the goal, right? Like I'm making way less than I would as a teacher right now, but that's okay because that gives like it giving myself that foundation, I think allows me to approach this from a much more like ethical standpoint, I guess, in terms of helping people. Like knowing that I'm secure in my own regard, I'm
Mhm.
not operating from a place of scarcity to help people. Like if someone doesn't want to sign on to my program with me and invest in the program to invest in themselves, like it's not like I'm not gonna eat or like I'm gonna lose my house. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
so I've given myself that kind of runway as well.
I mean, that's really helpful because then you're not putting yourself into bad situations and trying to take on way more than you can handle.
Right. I mean, if I really had to do it, like to be frank, like to get out of teaching, I would have sold my house and started over and just like, lived very, very humbly if I had to,
Mhm.
because it just meant that much to me to do what I wanted and to go for at least, go for and give everything I could to build something that I wanted to build.
Yeah. So then, all right, so you decided this is what you want to do. How do you start marketing? How do you determine what your audience is going to be? I mean, does that just kind of come to you from the beginning or what?
Well, I think our guy Dan Martell says it the best way. Like your greatest pain ends up being the people that you can help the best, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, having lived the mental health battles that I had as a teacher, having lived the struggles with how to understand how to be healthy as a teacher, like, having lived that for years, and then it only getting worse during the first part of COVID, like, having lived where a lot of teachers live. And
Mhm.
while I have had trouble finding data on this, on average, I do believe teachers are more unhealthy than the average person, which is already not good considering how unhealthy our country is to begin with.
Mhm.
Um, but then I just kind of went right to that. At first, it was going to be just like band directors, but then I realized like, no, like the entire education system and profession needs something like this or a path to self empowerment that is currently just not there or like an avatar for self empowerment. I think that's really the biggest thing is like,
Mhm.
I want to be the avatar for teacher self empowerment in a way that no one else is really marketing right now or no one else is doing right now. So, in terms of the marketing side of things, like when you've lived where the people that you want to help currently are, your marketing takes care of itself and you're never short of inspiration.
Yeah, you have a very specific niche, and that was something that I had trouble with. Is
Hmm.
I thought my message was going to be a big general to the general audience, but that's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, like especially like real estate, like that is such a broad field. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely figuring out who you're really talking to is incredibly important.
Yeah. You said you got that from the Martell's coaching?
A little bit, yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, definitely there's a lot of good messaging and a lot of very short, concise sound bites that Dan has that he's developed over the years. And it's
Mhm.
interesting, like the best advice that he's developed, like he's probably developed those short sound bites that are really, really heavy hitters for us over years of taking a long time to
Hmm.
figure that out, right? Like that's usually
Yeah.
how that goes. Like as you get to that simple scales, complex fails kind of mindset,
Hmm.
a lot of times I think you have to reverse engineer it from you do a bunch of complex stuff that just doesn't work or takes up a ton of your time, and then you end up going to the simple out of necessity. And so I think, a lot of those great sound bites I'm applying from him are
Hmm.
probably from him working through those things, which is which is where his book came from. He applied that to himself, right? Buy back
Yeah.
your time is from he lost what was going to be his first marriage because he was working too much, didn't know how to delegate, didn't know how a pathway and a system for getting time back to live the life he wanted. And so that pain allowed him to then turn around and give the gift to the world that is that book.
I like that you bring up simple because one of my friends, he just tells me you're making things too complex, and even in our little group chat that we have, just going back and simplifying everything just I think makes it a lot easier.
hmm Yesterday, I was actually, so I finally found a graphic that, I wanted to do like a roadmap for
Hmm.
people that come in, like as the group coaching program I'm building, which is called FIT, the Fitness Initiative for Teachers,
Hmm.
which will launch later this year. Right now, I'm just doing one-to-one coaching just to kind of build the reps, the fundamentals, and help people.
Hmm.
Um, but that also has helped me build my process out. And so now that I've got reps on the process, I mean, I literally was able to draw a 5 or 6 step process with just like a curved line. And I went
Yeah.
through it yesterday and I was like, okay, I got to sit down. Let me see if I can do this. And it took me all of like 2 minutes to get the steps in the process there. And I spent way more time like putting colors and making it look fancy and shit, you know?
Yeah.
So, which is good. And that's a complexity that I don't want to, get into too much, right? But like the
Right.
actual, how do you go from one point to the other in your health
Mhm.
as a teacher? Here's the steps that you follow. And it ended up being 5 steps with like a bonus 6 step if you want to be like a high achiever.
Oh yeah. So then, for the people that you're working with, it's a lot of age ranges. Does the
Mhm.
program change for different age groups?
Yes, and the beauty of that is it's allowed me to kind of reverse engineer the process and the steps that everybody can take. And like you might leapfrog over some steps, right? So, like initially from fitness program wise, I actually was just talking with one of my clients, and she is now down over 12 pounds in the 3.5 months we've been working together.
Wow.
And she hit a low weight today that she hasn't hit since before she had her son. So like
Wow.
it's been like, I think 3 years now, like at least. And she couldn't even remember the last time that she was approaching the weight that she's at right now. And so that kind of a victory came from her starting with just using resistance bands for like the first 2 months we worked together. It was just learning how to eat, understanding the fundamentals of nutrition, and then just consistently using resistance bands. And she's been so consistent, man. And she directs high school musical theater. Like that is such a time consuming after school
Mhm.
gig. Like
Yeah.
having been in the arts, like I get it, man. And she's been so incredibly successful. So she's like the avatar for all the female teachers out there that are worried about like all the bullshit you hear online about like, oh, you got to balance hormones and calories don't matter. Like, stop it, man. Like, stop it. I hate that so much. Like, she has just figured it out and she's been consistent and it's been great. But she started with resistance bands only. And so like it's going from understanding how to move your own body with just your body weight to
Mhm.
maybe using some light resistance bands, to then moving dumbbells, to then we go to some real heavy hitting stuff with like, we're going to understand how to have proper running technique. We're going to see if we can get your mile time down. We're going to like, now we're hitting like what went away was national fitness standards. We used to have those presidential medals of
Mhm.
fitness, right?
Yep.
And that's what I'm building my program around is bringing those back for teachers. Like if you hit this mile time, you can bench press this not weight, but you can bench press this weight relative to your body weight, like a
Yeah.
ratio. Like
Hmm.
measuring it more by ratio, I think is a fair way to do it. But
Yeah.
like having like medals of physical fitness for teachers and bringing it back for them. Like we went away from that and having those standards for kids. No wonder everybody's gotten unhealthier. We don't reinforce it and try to have competitive standards for kids at a young age.
Wait, do they not have those
I don't believe
anymore?
they do. I've been
Oh
trying to look,
wow.
but like they got away from emphasizing it because like I think in the 2010s we very got into we're afraid to hurt people's feelings no matter what they want to do, and I'm just not
Hmm.
all about that. Like I'll
Yeah.
just say it point blank, if you are overweight or obese, you're unhealthy and you need to lose weight. Like point blank. Like I don't like the fact that there's people that are fat influencers that just say there. I even came across somebody yesterday on Instagram that's taking Ozempic just for blood work and not trying to lose weight. And I was like, that's preposterous. Like, that's great that you've improved your blood work. That's awesome. But over the lifetime, carrying that adipose tissue around your internal organs is going to be a recipe for disaster. And so we've gotten away from telling people that, hey, eating cake whenever you want is making you fat and it's not healthy. And I don't care if your feelings are hurt if you hear that, because you need to hear that, because too many people are letting their feelings run their lives instead of objective reality. And so we've let that intrude on how we teach physical fitness in the schools. And we've let it intrude on how we as a society approach health and fitness. Like, your feelings don't matter at some point, and this is me going into like full on hardcore coach mode. Like, at some point your feelings don't matter. If you don't want to die an early death, or like a horrible early death from a preventable chronic disease, a lot of people need to drop a lot of pounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between enabling and uh well, just it's just straight up enabling if you just allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what's
but
funny about that? You say enabling. What actually really started, it just jogged my mind, and I have yet to talk about this. What really started me on this path of getting serious, even though I wasn't successful early on, it was the year before COVID, 2019. I really started to take some serious steps. I was working out more consistently, not necessarily following a good plan, but the reason I started doing that is because my mom noticed that I was gaining weight and she said something. So I don't believe in fat shaming random people on the internet, because I don't think that's good. Pointing out objective reality is one thing, but
mhm,
going and commenting on somebody that's obese or overweight on their like profile and telling them that they're like a terrible person, or they're, or calling them names, not productive. It
right.
really comes from somebody that actually truly cares about you in your life. That's where fat shaming is healthy. Like, because it's somebody that actually loves you, that wants you to be around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I battled this with, like, there's some diet and exercise things that I'm working on with my mom and dad. And so I tell them, like, hey, what you're doing is not working. We need to work on XYZ. And so I've actually taken my mom on as a free client now, because now I'm helping her with strength training.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, but we were honest about that because we all love each other and care about each other. So within, like, whether it's a really good friend or a family member that loves you, like, that's where it can be effective, and I think it's warranted. But randomly telling people that they're, awful people and that they look terrible, and like, it's not effective, and you're actually going to probably make the issue worse. So I'm against the conventional definition of fat shaming in that regard as for motivation. But in terms of within people that your inner circle, I think it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, my wife used to tell me I need to work out.
Hmm.
And then I actually tell my wife that she needs to work out too, because she's not like big or anything, but
Hmm.
it's all about the quality of life at the end. Like, do you want to be able to still run around with your grandchildren, or do you want to be bedridden and not get to do the things that you want to do? Plus, it's a really good thing to see have our kids watch her work out too, because then it's going to put those habits into them.
Strong parents, strong kids.
Yeah. So you had briefly mentioned mindset earlier, and I
Hmm.
definitely want to talk about that. So what is the biggest mindset hurdle you've had to get over to start your own business?
Understanding that it's going to take a long time and operating like you've already succeeded, just point blank.
Yeah.
And that's something that I recalibrated myself on, even as recent as this week. Um, because there's going to be months like early on when you don't have the eyeballs that these big fitness influencers do. When your mission
Mhm.
hasn't really been out there for years, you're not going to have the kind of traction that big influencers do. And so it just
Mhm.
takes understanding that it takes time, but knowing that I've already made a difference in some people's lives already, knowing that what you're doing is helping people, and understanding that you're succeeding by helping people no matter what you do, no matter what your bottom line looks like. Understand, if you can operate from that place of abundance and operate like I'm operating, like I've already made $1 million from this business, which I have
Mhm.
not even come nearly close to, not even close.
Yeah.
But because I've set myself up to operate from a place of abundance, not operating from a place of desperation in my life in general, then
Mhm.
I have a foundation to operate that way. And I think a lot of people, especially teachers, like they have a weird relationship with money, like, and a lot of people look at profit in general as something that's bad. And I've just never felt that way. I think profit is good. I think it's all down to the individual. For me, I've used my financial success in my own personal life as a foundation to where I don't need to be financially successful or super profitable in a business that is out to help people and change America, you know? Because that would
Mhm.
be very, I think, selfish of me, right? So in this case, like, my own economic success and stability as an individual is allowing me to help people the best. So I don't view profit as evil at all. I think it's good. It just really depends on the person. And sure, there's a lot of people out there that are have a terrible mindset around that. And there's a lot of very wealthy people that have a very crappy mindset around helping people, to be honest. But I guess I just operate in a different space there. That's my mindset on it.
Yeah, it's really good.
Hmm.
So I guess now knowing what you know now, what's some advice you'd give to yourself when you're just getting started?
Just like you mean like a year ago and getting into the business?
Yeah.
Just what I just said a second ago about mindset is that it's just understanding that it's going to take time and to be patient and to know that it's a blessing that you have the opportunity to do what you're doing and just be patient because it very likely will be something that grows more exponentially than linearly. And
Yeah.
so it'll be inconsistent and then eventually it just feels like it's going to exponentially go. And so just staying the course and just enjoying the process, I think to me would be important because I definitely had some very negative mindset points, not nearly as negative or mental health wise, even close to what I was feeling during my last year of teaching, but definitely I hit some low points mentally over the last year as I was doing this and just remembering that, it's a process and to continue to seek out improvement and growth and helping people as much as possible and being as abundant as possible to do so.
Yeah. It's always going to be more difficult than than we plan for.
Yep,
But just keep pushing through it and we'll get there, right?
exactly.
Cool. Well, Aaron, I appreciate you for coming on and telling your story. How can people work with you? How can people reach out to you?
So right now, my primary platform that I post content on is going to be Instagram, and my
Mhm.
handle is at Aaron W. Jacobs. And
Mhm.
I will also be building out my group FIT program for teachers that will be hosted on School, which is SKOOL. Which why would you not host a platform for teachers on a thing called School? That makes way too much sense. Come on.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's where you can find me primarily is going to be Instagram at Aaron W Jacobs. It's a lot of free advice there for everybody. A mainstay that I like to do that I don't see a lot of people doing is on my stories. I like to post the meals that I eat with the exact things that are in there.
Mm.
I'm a big proponent of building your diet around single ingredient whole foods so that you develop your taste for them,
Mhm.
not relying on like adding a ton of salt to your food or like a ton of seasoning. Like if you crave and taste and how you crave the taste for those foods and how you feel when you eat those foods, you have a protein bar here and there. You have like, a protein ice cream here and there, or like a fake treat or like some artificial stuff. If you build that on top of foundation of very wholesome ingredients, you're going to be in a much better spot than most people and you'll feel fantastic. And so I show people how to do that on my stories primarily.
Yeah, that's great advice. And super helpful too, especially for those that are just used to eating the stuff on the inside of the grocery store instead of on the outside.
Yeah, I generally my advice to people when I'm going to harsh like, kick your ass coach mode, if your diet's really convenient, it's probably not very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, your diet needs to be a little bit less convenient.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much. We'll make sure to have the link in the description. And again, I appreciate you coming on.
You got it. Yeah, it's awesome, John. Great to talk to you. I'll see you around.
All right, take care.